Coming up on The Breakdown, democracy is in danger, but we are fighting back. Pelosi fights back by announcing a select committee to investigate the insurrection. And our guest, State Representative Julie Johnson, is fighting back in her home state of Texas. We'll take your questions from Twitter. Plus, we'll head into the weekend with a live game and a chance for you to win some LP swag. It all starts now. Good evening and welcome to The Breakdown. I'm Tara Setmayer. The Rick Wilson is traveling tonight, so I'll be riding solo. But we still have a busy show ahead, and we have a special guest tonight. You asked, we listened, and we have Democratic Texas State Representative Julie Johnson with me later on in the hour to discuss what in the hell is happening in the state of Texas. What are the Republicans doing? What's at stake there? What's happening with voting rights, redistricting? She is here with me to take your Twitter questions by storm. So we're going to talk all about Texas and really how what's happening in Texas is a reflection of what could be happening in other states. So make sure that you stay tuned for her, and please tweet me at #AskTheBreakdown, and I'll definitely answer some of those questions later in the show with Julie Johnson as well. Plus, we still have the voicemail system going old school. Here it is. There's the number. Please call, leave a voicemail message, and you just might hear your voice on The Breakdown. So let's get into it. It's been kind of a busy news day today. A lot has been going on all across the spectrum. We've got busy deals being done on Capitol Hill with infrastructure. We might actually have an infrastructure deal. All the jokes about infrastructure week, guess what? We might actually have a deal. I'll believe it when it's signed, but there's progress. There's bipartisan support. Yay. Whoever would have thought? We haven't seen this in many years. So there's that. We also have what's happening. Actually, I want to take a moment to say that I'm really, really praying for the folks down there in Miami. The tragedy overnight of that partial building collapse is just hard to fathom. I have a lot of friends in South Florida, thankfully none affected by this, but this is an unimaginable tragedy and there's still people missing. So our thoughts and prayers and hearts go out to the folks impacted by that building collapse down there in Miami-Dade. That's just awful. Praying for a miracle there. But in other news, we have Nancy Pelosi, who has decided that she is going to put together a select committee on January 6th, which is something that we reported on Tuesday night that she had mentioned she was going to do it. They didn't really have any details yet, but it's official now that she's definitely going to do it. And what does that mean? What does a select committee for January 6th mean? Well, it's a step in the right direction. It's not the full bipartisan commission, the 9/11 style commission that we were all hoping for and that the incident on January 6th deserves, but it is something. And what this does is it consolidates the different committees that have been investigating January 6th into one select committee, and which means that it's temporary. And they call it a select committee because the speaker will designate who will be on that committee. It will be run by Democrats. The shortcomings of this is that some people think that it will be partisan. It'll be seen as partisan, even though it'll have subpoena power, even though the idea behind it is to get to the bottom of what happened, the root causes, how did we get there, who was behind it. Like I said, they will have subpoena power. Now, whether the people they subpoena honor those subpoenas is a different story. But this is similar to what Republicans did with Benghazi when Republicans controlled the House. Now, I was up on Capitol Hill then as a staffer. And even though there were a lot of questions around Benghazi and the level of investigation was warranted, Republicans took it a little far at some point. And if you realize they used it as a political weapon, they weaponized the Benghazi hearing against Hillary Clinton. And they banged that drum for years. And no one can tell me that the impact of that did not have an effect on Hillary Clinton's presidential run. She was saddled with that. The whole emails, where are her emails, came out of the Benghazi committee hearings, that investigation. They discovered this while they were investigating Benghazi. So Republicans had no qualms whatsoever of going for the jugular on the Benghazi issue and beating it to death against Hillary Clinton and weaponizing it. So even though, Democrats are worried about it might be partisan, no one can, don't worry about that, okay? Continue to use this because this is actually a much bigger deal as far as the impact on our democracy than what happened at Benghazi. As tragic as that was, lives were lost and it was terrible. But it did not have a direct impact on the health of our democracy. This is a direct attack on our seat of government. And so they need to act like they're in power. So this is a step. Stop worrying about the partisan criticisms. Republicans didn't give two shits about that, and it works for them. Messaging, repeat it over and over and over again. So I hope that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats take advantage of the powers they have with this select committee. It's better than nothing, and get some answers about what the hell happened on January 6th and who was responsible for it. And if that means that it goes into the midterms, good. The American people need to be reminded of what happened that day. You never want to normalize this. So we don't know who's going to be on it yet. She hasn't appointed anyone. They're looking at Benny Thompson, who is the head of the Homeland Security Committee, I believe, as possibly running it. But we'll see. We'll see. There's still time for her to appoint them. There's still time to find out how long it's going to be. She'll require a written report at the end. But when, she hasn't said yet. She said she's not going to give away what the committee is going to do. She's not going to tell them what to do. But something I found interesting that she said when she made this announcement, she said it was with solemn and sadness that she makes this announcement, which tells me that she's taking it seriously and that she's not gloating about it. She's not basking in, her role as speaker, that she can do this. She's not throwing her power around willy-nilly, like, I'm the speaker, so I'm doing this. That's the right tone. It is with solemnity and sadness, because Republicans blocked the ability to have a real January 6th 9/11 style commission. So I was glad to see her take that posture with it, and they need to keep it up. Keep it up. Stop worrying about politics. What else is going on? Oh, Rudy Giuliani. Remember him? Giuliani has his law license suspended in New York. I'm telling you, it couldn't have happened to a better person, and it's long overdue. And for my friends who are lawyers in New York and my legal analyst friends, they've all said how unusual this step is for an appellate court to do this, which means that it doesn't bode well for Rudy Giuliani. He has an opportunity to appeal this, but it takes a while. And he could ultimately be disbarred, which in my opinion should happen. Why is he suspended? Well, because he said a bunch of BS about the election in a court of law. You're an officer of the court. You can't do that. There are ethics rules. And Rudy Giuliani violated a lot of them. So he's finally starting to pay a price. And I think this is just the beginning. Let's not forget, he had a raid at his apartment. He's got some legal troubles. And now he cannot practice law in a courtroom because his law license is suspended. I suspect that Rudy Giuliani will never practice law again, and nor should he. And what a shame, how it started and how it ended. I can't wait to see the memes for that. So that's Giuliani. No fan of the Lincoln Project, and we've dragged him many, 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 many times. Do you guys remember when he tried to blame the Lincoln Project for the insurrection? Yeah, he did that too. Our lawyers were all over that, by the way. So that's Giuliani. He is in some trouble. Speaking of the big lie, which is what has gotten him in a lot of trouble, there are reports that there's some people who are upset in Arizona. Republicans are continuing to come out now, local officials in Arizona, complaining about this freaking fraud. And Arizona has laid the foundation for this. Other states are looking into doing something similar. And CNN the other night, Anderson Cooper, my buddy over there at CNN, he got the Maricopa County recorder, Stephen Richer, who is one of the first Republican elected officials there locally, that has said that this is a bunch of bullshit and this is a disaster and it needs to end. Take a listen to what he had to say.
This is insane just from a competence standpoint. We've had 13 other states visit, and I would say to them, this is not the audit you want. This is far from the gold standard of audits. You're looking for the Ernst & Young of accounting or the Latham & Watkins of law firms. You're not looking for a newbie company who has never done this before, who, as CNN very capably showed, doesn't even have office space and is sending the data off to a mysterious house in Montana. That's not the gold standard. You want to do better from that, just from a competency standpoint, and so that you can talk to more than just the Stop the Steal crowd. Let's be honest, this Arizona audit isn't going to convince anyone outside of the crowd that already believes the election was stolen.
This is Looney Tunes. And I applaud Stephen Richer for speaking out about this. We need the local officials, particularly Republicans, to rebuke their own, because the crazy is freaking out of control. And tonight's show is about fighting back. It's all about, making sure that we equip you on how to fight back, that you know that there are other people out there fighting back against this. And Stephen Richer is one of them out there in Arizona. And I'm glad to see it, because this thing has gone on way longer than it's supposed to. Not only that, this whole thing about that they're flying, like bringing ballots to Montana. CNN did a report on that too. And this is true. I encourage you guys to Google it. There are so many questions about the chain of custody going on here with these ballots. It is completely out of control. With some random guy, it's in a cabin in Montana somewhere that's supposed to be an institute or a lab to examine the ballots. It is such a freaking fraud. It really, really is. And you know who else has investigated this? There's a new report out that has been co-authored by one of the co-authors is a former Republican Secretary of State, Trey Grayson. He was the former Secretary of State of Kentucky, I believe. And the report delves into the details of why this Arizona recount with the cyber ninjas is terrible. It goes into it. I mean, it outlines all these, I think 7 major areas, if I remember, and it's done by the States United Democracy Center. That's the name of it. I couldn't think of it. The States United Democracy Center. They're the ones who issued this report. It's a nonpartisan, independent assessment, and it lists all of these problems and why other states should not do this, and the pitfalls that you could run into if you do this. I mean, and they also just drag cyber ninjas as well, because it's, first of all, the company's name is Cyber Ninjas, for God's sakes. So how is anybody supposed to take that seriously? Not only that, they have no experience whatsoever in actually doing election audits, like no experience. There's a certification body that certifies different auditors for do that. They don't have that certification. That's actually a thing, by the way. They don't have that certification. They don't even have an office. Like, it is just so absurd. But this report outlines all of the pitfalls, the problems, and why it is a terrible idea to do this again. And like I said, it's co-authored by the former Kentucky Secretary of State, Trey Grayson. We hope to get him on the show and we can talk about it even more. And Dr. Barry Burden of the Elections Research Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So like legit people. Norm Eisen, also former colleague of mine at CNN. He's also involved. I believe he's the co-chair of this organization. So check out that report. It's pretty damning. If you weren't convinced that the cyber ninjas weren't reliable, you'll fully understand why they're terrible and why this is a horrible thing in Arizona, and we cannot allow this to happen anywhere else after you check out that report. Just the executive summary alone is devastating. You know who else is paying attention? Other secretaries of state across the country, particularly Colorado. We now have the Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold. She wrote an opinion piece in USA Today explaining why she has banned fraudits, like what's happening in Arizona, from ever happening in her state. She does not want that coming there. And I'm hoping that there are other secretaries of state that are paying attention to this and will do similar things. assuming that the Republican legislatures in those states don't strip the secretaries of state of their powers like they're doing in Georgia and other places. So we're paying attention to this. Lots of folks are paying attention to this because it is literally a power grab against our fundamental rights to vote. And it's happening at the state level, which is why I was so excited to have Julie Johnson on the show tonight. And we'll have her in just a moment. But before we do, I could not let this slide. Did you guys hear that Donald Trump was really, really, really upset with Saturday Night Live? So upset with Saturday Night Live that he wanted the Justice Department to go after them. Really? I mean, come on. So that goes to show you that, Alec Baldwin and all of the jokes that they did and all of those skits, it got under Trump's skin because malignant narcissists cannot stand being mocked. So I say, good for you, Saturday Night Live. Keep it up. And everyone else who mocks them, including us, we will continue to mock Trump and his clan and his merry band of misfits because they deserve it. And his little Twitter fingers, he can't use them anymore. So he can just suck his thumb and go hang out in the corner and cry because he's being made fun of. And he doesn't have the power anymore to tell people to make it go away. Too bad, Donald Trump. Oh my goodness. This guy is such an authoritarian wannabe. I'm telling you, how is that conservative? I would love to hear how conservatives explain that as being a conservative use of presidential power. Narrator, it's not. Gee whiz. Anywho. All right. We're getting ready for our guest tonight, Julie Johnson. She is a fighter who can deep dive into the fight going on in Texas. And she's got some newfound Twitter fame to prove this. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with Julie Johnson.
I want to know why what happened in Myanmar can't happen here.
No reason. I mean, it should happen here. No reason. Right? That's right.
America has crossed a line. The Republican Party believes in ending the American experiment, led by a man obsessed with power and money, who will say and do anything to seize control again.
This election was rigged.
To punish those who oppose him. His followers don't just disagree with us. They've got something worse in mind. We know what national populism and authoritarianism lead to. Every time.
That's what this is all about.
That's why we will never compromise with this evil. We will never step back from the line because we believe in America. Are you in this fight? Or have they already won?
And welcome back to The Breakdown. Our guest for tonight's show is Democratic Texas State Representative Julie Johnson. Julie, welcome to The Breakdown.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Wonderful. Well, we're thrilled to have you because we are all about fighters, because that's what we are here at the Lincoln Project. And anytime that we can highlight other folks that are out there on the ground, particularly elected officials who are fighting back against this nonsense and defending democracy, we are happy to highlight them. So welcome to the clan, the clan of fighters.
Well, Lord knows we've been doing a lot of that in Texas lately. So it's great to be here.
You have. Now, for those who don't know you, you were one of the Texas Democrats that broke quorum and walked the hell out of the state capitol to block passage of this god-awful restrictive voting bill that the Republicans are trying to push through there. And that took a lot of courage. So we have a soundbite of you talking about this. And then on the other side, you can talk a little bit about what that experience was like from the inside. Let's listen.
Sure. The conference committee has added a provision regarding overturning an election that is truly undemocratic and offensive to the rule of law. It says that the court may declare the election void without attempting to determine how individuals actually voted. This provision allows a lawsuit to overturn an election without having to prove that the fraud actually occurred. Just think about that. Your election can be overturned without the other side being required to prove actual voter fraud. Additionally, the provision lowers the burden of proof to overturn an election. What has happened to process? What has happened to the rules that this body is supposed to care about? We have rules and processes in order to have a just society so that people can have faith and confidence in the laws that govern them. Democracies are based on the rule of law whose formation are based on an open debate and participation and whose enforcement are based on true facts and fairness. That people can have faith and confidence in the laws that govern them. Democracies are based on the rule of law whose formation are based on an open debate and participation and whose enforcement are based on true facts and fairness. When these principles fail, our foundation crumbles into autocracy, dictatorship, and tyranny.
Amen. So tell the audience a little bit more about what the Republicans tried to do that actually forced you guys to say enough is enough, we're walking out.
Well, there were a lot of things that were going on. First of all, they filed a terrible bill that was just fraught with voter suppression and a design to really intimidate voters from coming to the polls. But what happened was we had the bill in the House. In the House, we made a lot of amendments to the bill, which made it better. It was still a terrible bill, but we made it better. And then it went back to the Senate, and they had the option to concur or make their own amendments. But what they did is they stripped every House amendment and then wrote an additional 20 pages of this bill with all new provisions that had never gone through committee, that had never been debated, that the public never ever had a right to comment on and weigh in on. And they did that within 24 hours of the deadline. We got the changes that they made. Now, remind you, it was a 20-page addition to the bill with a whole new set of provisions at 4:52 when the clock was to run at midnight with no opportunities to prepare. And it was unexcusable. They completely violated every rule of decorum, of procedure, of process that we have in the House just to steamroll us into one of the most horrendous voter suppression bills this country has ever seen, and we were just not going to have it.
Well, this is, for those who don't follow Texas politics in Austin, this is pretty extraordinary. Breaking quorum and walking out to do that has only happened 3 other times in history. 2003, when it was about redistricting, and I remember that clearly because I was actually on the Bill Maher show with Alec Baldwin talking about this, and there were a group of the Texas legislators at the time who were hiding out in Oklahoma in protest over the redistricting. Right, that's right. So I remember that very clearly. But then before that, 1979 and like 1870. So this does not happen. It's extraordinary, which speaks to the seriousness, the magnitude of what this bill was trying to do as far as restricting voting rights. What were some of the most egregious parts of this bill that were so objectionable?
Well, there was a lot of things. One, that completely obliterated souls to the polls, and they restricted the amount of hours that people could vote. 2, they were really trying to clamp down on mail-in ballot. And one of the things that they did was they said only one ballot drop-off location per county. Now, just get your head around that. There's 254 counties in Texas, and some counties have 10,000 people. Then you have counties like Dallas County, where I'm from, that has 3 million people, and for one ballot drop-off. Second, then additionally, you could challenge an election and try to sue to overthrow it without having to prove actual voter fraud. Additionally, they were going to let poll watchers in and remove all power from election judge for poll watchers that were trying to intimidate voters to try to kick them out, which was incredible to me because just think about that. We have a bunch of crazy Trump people down here in Texas, and you know that they were going to come into polls and scream at voters and try to intimidate them and keep them from exercising their right to vote. We have a lot of first-time voters. We have a lot of immigrants who've never voted in this country before. They don't know what to do. There's uncertainty. There's hesitancy. And the opportunity for voter intimidation was outrageous. And then they were providing criminal penalties for people who were going to drive more than 3 people to the poll. Get that? You can't
That's
drive.
unbelievable.
You can't even drive somebody to the polls and help.
What if you have a
people
large
who don't
family?
have access.
What
Well,
happens?
it was-
Or you bring your neighbors.
Well, right.
You know,
Well, yeah, it's helping your neighbors. You can drive people you're related to, but you couldn't help your neighbors. You couldn't drive people from your church, from your community, from your
which is
workplace.
what it was really about. It's really about that.
Yeah. And what they're trying to do, the Republicans try to make it all about voter ID. Well, Texas has one of the most restrictive voter ID laws in the country. And that's been the law for a long time. So they say, well, what about having to prove that who you are to vote? We've already had that law. You know, you can't even use a valid student ID issued by a state university to vote in Texas. But you know what you can do? You can use your gun license. That counts as a valid ID.
Well, that's very on brand for Texas. And listen, I love Texas. Okay. I have a lot of friends there, people who are very close to me that live there. Unfortunately, some of them are crazy Trump supporters. You guys know who you are. I love you anyway. But I love Texas because I always say that Texans have swagger like New Jersey, which is where I'm from. But listen, you know, this is unfortunate watching what's going on down there. And some of these, you know, this Greg Abbott has been horrific. Your attorney general there is another problem. Isn't he under indictment?
Yeah, he's been under indictment for like the last 5 years.
Yeah.
It's amazing, you know, how other people get a speedy trial, but when you're the attorney general, how it always seems to get delayed and delayed and delayed after election after election. Funny how that happens.
Yeah, no kidding. That's a little New Jersey-like. They had a lot of problems in my home state too, with you know, people going to jail. We had a couple governors. You know, it's always something happening. But you know, this idea, Harris County was another one of those counties where we saw there was only one drop box for 4 or 5 million people there. That's Houston. And yet there were almost no instances of voter fraud in the entire state of Texas. Didn't the Secretary of State there invest, you know, countless hours and thousands of dollars in taxpayer money, and they came up with pretty much nothing?
That's exactly right. This Texas Secretary of State said our elections were safe and secure. Safe and secure. And they found no evidence of voter fraud at all. And, you know, Dan Patrick put $1 million bounty out there for anyone who could uncover legitimate voter fraud in Texas. You know, and he never paid his money because there was not any legitimate voter fraud in Texas.
And yet, here they are with this voting bill, this ominous voting, restrictive voting bill, based off of what it seems to me like there's always some fixes, right? There's things that you could do to tighten things up. And, you know, what do you say to the critics that say, well, no, we need to fix these things? You know, what's wrong with election integrity, which is the buzzword that Republicans are using? What do you say to the critics that say that you guys are crazy? Why are you stopping us from securing our elections?
Well, we have secure elections. That's the point, that the Secretary of State has already deemed them secure. The Republican Secretary of State has already deemed them secure. You know, my response to that is, why don't we try to, rather than restrict our citizens' right to vote, I don't understand what they're so afraid of. Why don't we try to expand people's access to the right to vote? You know, it would be awesome if we had online voter registration. That would be a novel concept. You know that you still have to print a ballot and sign it and mail it in order to register to vote. Everything else is online. We can pay our taxes online. It's online is secure enough for them to take our money, but it's not secure enough for a citizen to register to vote in the state of Texas. It's just crazy.
Well, I think we know why. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to get into a little bit of my theory as to why they're doing this, because I think it has something to do with demographic changes. So when we come back, we're going to take a short break. We're going to continue the conversation with Representative Julie Johnson of the great state of Texas. We'll be right back.
We showed you the line between what we should be and what the radical edge of a dangerous anti-American movement wants us to become. It's the line between freedom and autocracy. In 2020, we set out to defeat Donald Trump. Trump lost, but the sick, poisonous ideology of authoritarian nationalist populism lived. Our mission now is to defeat it, to break it, to drive it out of American politics and life, to expose the funders, operators, and conspirators behind the plot to end American democracy, to work with anyone of good faith and strong heart willing to fight against the spreading darkness, to stop Trump's return, to stop Mitch McConnell from retaking the Senate, to stop Kevin McCarthy from retaking the House. It's all on the line, and it's even more dangerous than ever, because if they win, America doesn't just lose, America ends.
And we are back on the breakdown here with Representative Julie Johnson of Texas. We're discussing voter suppression and how the Democrats are fighting back down there in the great state of Texas. Before we took the little break, I teased that I have an idea as to why Republicans are so hell-bent on issuing voter suppression type bills. And I think it has to do with demographics. But before we get into that conversation, I did want to talk to you a little bit about the actual walkout when you guys actually dispersed. I mentioned briefly in 2003, some headed off to Oklahoma. What did you guys do? Where did you go? And what was it like? Walk us through what it was like for the actual walkout.
Well, sure. So once we voted, they had the motion to go out of bounds, which was to deal with this crazy additional 20 pages. And once that got through and the actual bill came to the floor, we had been churning the calendar all day to try to run the clock out so that we wouldn't get to the bill. And Republicans were getting very antsy about that. And there's a technique called calling the question. And that's where you get 25 signatures to end the debate. Well, that is a very drastic move, and that has rarely been done in the Texas House because we have our right to debate. Each member has a right to speak on, for, or against a bill, to ask questions of the author, and to really flesh it out on the House floor. That's part of the excitement of the House. And they were going to cut our rights to debate. And that throughout that evening, members have been slowly kind of trickling out on our desks. We have our desks are antique. They're over 100 years old. We have these vintage voting buttons that have a key in them. And so members, but when you take your key, you're locked out and nobody can vote for you. You're registered out to vote. And so members throughout, up front, probably from about 8 o'clock on, had started taking their keys. You know, we needed at least over 50 Democrats to take their keys and leave. And so we get there, and then it's about time, and they're going to call the question. And they're going to take that extraordinary move and use that tool. So the only tool we had left in our toolbox was to break quorum. And at 10:52, all Democrats left the building. And we had arranged through the NAACP a fabulous African-American church just right next to the Capitol in Austin. And so we went there because we felt like that was a real fitting place to see. We double dared them to send the DPS troopers to, the home of the Black church and for the Black community who's going to be most singularly affected by this bill and come and drag us out of there. And so we went there as a statement of protest to highlight the inequities that this bill was going to provide. And it was very, very exciting. There was just so much energy. And, when we did it, we were just felt like we were really fighting, because oftentimes we can have our words and this time our actions. We were actually able to put it all in motion and take a really hard stand and say, no more. We are not going to take it anymore. Enough is enough. We're going to do whatever it takes to stop this bill. And it was thrilling to be part of it.
Good for you. And I think that people listening to this interview will feel a certain semblance of encouragement, knowing that there are elected officials on the ground at the local level who are willing to put that fight out there and put it all on the line. Because I know the Democrats, at least nationally, are oftentimes criticized for not having that same grit and that fight the way Republicans do. And it's important for people to see that there are folks like you out there doing this because it's so critically important. So I applaud what you guys have done. And, as someone who worked for Republicans for almost 27 years, against against Democrats and trying to unseat them, it still feels a little weird watching Republicans just lose their minds and do things that are just so antithetical to what they claim their principles are. But this is, it's about what's right. It's about country over party. And I have no problem applauding what you guys are doing there. So what's the next step, though? That kind of stopped it for now, right? Now the governor is pulling this from Britain. Go ahead. Sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in Texas, to your point of politicians who don't stand up, in Texas, we have a saying, you're all hat and no cattle.
Right.
So
That's
what
right.
That means is, you're just sort of out there strutting your stuff, but you have no substance behind it. Well, this night, the Texas delegation, we were hats, but we had a lot of cattle. We were raising it up and we were fighting the way that we know how in Texas to do. But I think that's an expression that just tells a lot about who we are. As Democrats here in Texas, we're scrappy and we're willing to use it all to get it done.
Good for you guys. I think you guys also have another expression, come and take it, which is what you guys dared them to do while you were in that black church. We dare you to come take our keys.
That's right. That's right.
Right. So as we were talking about that, what happens now? Because the governor has a couple tricks up his sleeve too, where he's going to call you guys back into special session, which is also very rare. He didn't call you guys back into special session for Hurricane Harvey, for mass shootings, for other really significant events, but he's calling you guys back into special session to make sure that you debate this bill and ram it through, I presume. What's happening now? What are the next steps?
Well, he's called us in for a special session starting July 8th. But one of the things he did was he took the extraordinary step of vetoing the entire budget for the legislative branch of government. I mean, just think about that. Where one branch of government tries to eliminate another branch of government. It's a complete violation of separation of powers. It's just unconscionable what he is doing. So, we're looking at all of our options concerning that, maybe a litigation strategy, but we're planning on going back to the special session. And, everything's on the table. It's going to be interesting to see what is in the bill that they file. When we start a special, it's essentially starting a brand new session. So they have to file a new bill. I think ever since the country took notice of this terrible bill that they filed, they've been trying to toe tap around and justify. Like my favorite one was when they were changing voting hours to 1 o'clock on Sunday from 11 o'clock. That has been in the bill since the beginning of it. They're saying, oh, it was a typo. It was really 11 o'clock. I just about died when I saw that. It was so disingenuous and so false and just a blatant lie. So who knows what's going to be in the actual bill. But we owe it to our constituents to go to Austin and see what's there, see the text of it, see what's on the table, debate, argue, go through the process, see if we can make the bill better, do it, all the things we do legislatively. But if we have to break quorum again, that's certainly a tool on the table, and we're evaluating that as well.
Oh my goodness. That is going to make for an exciting summer where you guys are usually not in session now. It wouldn't be until the fall. But is there anything that would stop this? I mean, you could just kind of keep doing this, right? If you needed to stop it, other than the Republicans giving you some concessions and it not being such a horrible bill, I presume.
Right. There's always the legislative process to see if the bill gets better, to see if we can make, provision improvements in the bill to make it tolerable for everyone. But at the end of the day, we'll have to see. But as of September 1st, all funding for the legislative branch ceases to exist. That means none of our staff gets paid. Everyone's health insurance is cut off. The Legislative Council, the Legislative Budget Board, everything relating to the legislative branch, Governor Abbott vetoed to try to coerce this body and to bend to his will to approve one of the most restrictive, terrible, oppressive, discriminatory voting bills. And we are not going to back down. We are not intimidated. And if we have to raise money on the side to pay our staff, then we're going to be raising money on the side to pay our staff, because our staff are some of the hardest working legislative staff in this country. Think about what we have to deal with. You know, over 7,000 bills were filed this past legislative session. We had to fight to kill a lot of very terrible things. And this is just punitive actions on our hardworking staff that run the legislative branch in Texas. And it's unconscionable, and the country needs to be outraged about it.
And the more that they hear about it, I think they will. I would consider that to be punitive petulance on the part of the governor, and he's punishing people who are the, hardworking, good public servants that the taxpayers of Texas pay to make sure that you have a functioning government. So, speaking of bringing attention to what's going on, you have some newfound Twitter fame. You now have over 27,000 followers. And you started off with about 10, right? And you've shot up to 27,000 over 2 days. How's that been? What do you say to the people that are calling you a Twitter hero?
Yeah, well, it was crazy. We can, to all you out there, we can always use more. It's Julie Johnson TX at Twitter. But, we just put out a funny little thing that says, I'm Julie Johnson. I'm a Democrat. I walked out. Greg Abbott has all these Twitter followers. We don't. Help us amplify our message. And, people really responded to that. And then a lot of my colleagues kind of jumped on and did the same thing, and really trying to build our base, because I think it's really frustrating in a state of 29 million people to get our voices out and to get people known and to hear about it. And obviously Twitter and social media are certainly platforms that we use to educate and inform our constituents and other people about what's going on. And so to be able to have a broad network is exciting and thrilling, and it's been a lot of fun. I've had a big kick out of it.
Well, I have to say that we here at the Lincoln Project participated in that and helping to amplify your voice and others in the Texas legislature who are standing up. Steve Schmidt said, I want to talk about Julie Johnson. And, Steve has a prolific Twitter following. And then I saw it from Steve's and I said, hell yeah, I'll retweet her. And I told our producers, I said, go get her. I want her on the show because she's badass and people need to hear what's going on in Texas. So glad to help contribute to it. So to our Lincoln Project brethren out there, follow Julie Johnson and her colleagues there and support them to fight back against Greg Abbott, because he does have a larger megaphone and he shouldn't. All right. Speaking of Twitter, we're going to take a couple Twitter questions while we've still got you, Julie. So let's start with our first Twitter question. Who have we got? There we go. Bobby Chavez. How is the progress on the Texas Democrats registering 2 million voters?
I know that we're out there trying to raise funds to get the staff in place to help get this ground game that we need to get. So we certainly need financial support. I know that Beto's group, Powered by People, is certainly getting that kicked off. I know my campaign is aggressively trying to reach out and register voters. Every Democrat is. So, I don't have the exact count on where we are, but I just know that we're all on the ground trying to get this going. We just finished the legislative session about a month ago, actually about 3 weeks ago, and now we're going to go right back into a special. And so we need resources to help us do that. There are a lot of Democrats and a lot of people that need to be registered here in this state. And we're going to do everything we can to get them registered. So we would love to have your help.
That's great. That actually, because we started talking about something else, but that goes right into the demographics issue. The demographics are changing considerably in Texas, and particularly in the area that you represent. That's one of those, the suburban Dallas area where things are changing. And some folks would say that, the Republicans the Democrats are looking at the demographics in Texas, and it's kind of the great white whale. Is it ever going to turn blue again? What are you seeing there? Because we saw a lot of pickups even on the national level in Congress from those suburban areas in Texas, and the demographics don't look great for who you would consider to be your typical Republicans.
Well, let's just take my own seat as an example. So my seat has been Republican for 40 years until I ran 2 cycles ago and flipped it. So in 2018, I decided, you know what? I've had it. I've had enough of it. I can't take it anymore. I'm a lawyer. I'm a mother of 2 sons. I just can't handle it anymore. I'm going to run for office. And so I'd never run before. And I ran against a 4-year incumbent. My district is suburban Dallas. I'm in Dallas County, but kind of in the corner there. And I won my race. I have one of the most diverse districts in Texas. I have over 78 different nationalities. We translated my campaign materials into 15 different languages. And we went out and told people we were here to represent them and we needed to make a change. I won my first race by 13.5 points. And then I did it again the second time when I ran for re-election. I won by 14 points, but it's hard work and it takes a lot of resources and a lot of effort. And that if we have candidates that are willing to work hard and if we're funded, we can go out there and get this message to the people, and they have responded. My own race is a great example of that.
Listen, that's a hell of a swing to go from 40 years Republican to a plus 14 Democratic district. That is significant in politics. So those of us who nerd out about that, good for you. Let's take the next question. All right, Dennis Green. Why has no one challenged the 1 box per county despite grossly unequal population as a violation of equal protection? Same for the lack of equipment in minority Democratic districts. It sounds like you guys are challenging that, but have you challenged it under equal protection?
Dennis, I think that there are several lawsuits out there about that, and we filed a lot of pieces of legislation to address that. But in the Texas legislature, we're 67 Democrats to 83 Republicans, and we just don't have the votes to get it passed. And it is part of the Republican plan to make it very difficult for people to vote. In fact, Dennis, to your point, one of the most egregious parts of the voter bill that was filed was taking away voting precincts out of Black minority neighborhoods and putting them into white neighborhoods, some to the extent of almost 18 different polling locations. I mean, it is the most offensive, discriminatory bill that has ever been filed. And, the way we do it in Texas, bigger is better. And so we're going to have the bigger, worst bill possible because that's just how our state thinks.
All right, we have one more Twitter question for you. From Mama Waters, I don't live in Texas. Would it help if everyone calls these Texas Republican representatives?
Well, phones ringing off the wall are always a good thing, but I'll be honest with you, Mama, people's constituents matter the most. What you can help do here is to help engage with our voter registration effort, help us raise money for all this effort that we need to do. Because if you remember at the beginning of the broadcast tonight, I said we don't have online voter registration. We have to do it hard ink to paper. And that is much more expensive in Texas, especially with the big state that we have versus some other states where you can just corner somebody at a Starbucks, pull up a website and get them to register to vote. We don't have that opportunity. So it's much more expensive to do voter registration here. So Mama Waters, if you can help us and get people to help us and support us, we'd be very grateful.
Boots on the ground, get out the vote efforts. It's one of the fundamental axioms of politics, and it still applies today, even in this digital world. Julie, before I let you go, I have to ask you about this photo that you tweeted out of your dog. Can you tell us why you're trolling Governor Abbott and why you claim he hates dogs?
Well, it is crazy. So there's a bill filed to prohibit tethering and chaining of dogs in the oppressive heat in Texas. It's inhumane and it's just such a lack of compassion for our animals. And we love our animals here in Texas, and that passed the House by a ridiculous, crazy margin. I don't remember the exact vote, but it was something like 140 to 10. Clear support. And same thing with the Senate, and he vetoed it. Who vetoes a bill to protect pet safety, especially our cute little dogs? And so I have the cutest dog on the planet, Skeeter. She's a little blonde miniature Dachshund, the cutest little thing. And so I'm like, yeah, I want to tweet my dog. I'm a dog lover. And, it just shows that the lack of compassion that this governor has. If he can't even show compassion to our vulnerable pets, who all they do is love us back. Think of the lack of compassion he's showing to the people of Texas by the policies he's doing. It's just unconscionable and just needs to be highlighted. It just speaks to volumes as to who he is as a person.
As if he weren't horrible enough, he doesn't even like your pets. And we here at the Lincoln Project are huge pet lovers. And, you know, my cat Tiki has his little Tiki Time fame here on the breakdown. Our viewers love him. And Rick's dogs are usually howling in the background, or his cat Nameless will show up every once in a while. But we're huge animal lovers here at the Lincoln Project. So we stand with you on that as well. And we don't like anyone that doesn't like pets. So, you know, Greg Abbott, get it together. You're the worst. So thank you so much for joining us, Julie. And our call to action tonight is actually to continue to help Julie and her Twitter. So follow Julie at Julie Johnson, Texas, to support her in her journey to fight voter suppression in Texas, because, you know, targeting souls to the polls, using poll watchers, all these things that they're trying to do is not good for our democracy. So we want to help Julie out. Julie Johnson, thank you so much for joining us. And you're going to have to come back and tell us what happens. Hopefully you guys won't have to walk out again.
Thank you so much for having me. And, you know, I'm happy to come, you know, bring you a little sunshine from Texas anytime you need it. So thank you so much.
We love it. Big shout out to my fellows down there in Texas. Stop this Trump stuff. Thanks, Julie.
All right. Take care.
All right. Isn't she great? See, women like that should encourage folks to run for office, because when you have that kind of passion for what's going on, she said, enough is enough. I'm going to do something about it. And I think that's fantastic. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, it takes a lot to be a public servant. So I applaud her for her efforts. All right, we're going to take a quick break. But before we do, I want to preview our latest episode of the Lincoln Project podcast, which is featuring our own communications director, Ryan Wiggins. She is the Lincoln Project's comms director, and she joins the fellas over there on the podcast and has a little couple things to say. Take a listen.
I cannot tell you how many times in 2016 I had people tell me they were voting for Trump because he would say what other people wouldn't say. It's like, well, other people won't say it because they shouldn't say it. Women look at men like that and see weakness. They see insecurity. They appeal to other bros, but other bros are just as lost as they are. There is no appeal to it.
So make sure to check out Ryan and the guys over on the Lincoln Project podcast. And after the quick break, we are going to play a little guessing game. Yes, me and the audience, you guys, you get to play along with me. I don't know what the prize is. I don't know what the reveal is, but it's a game. We all get to play it together, and you get some Lincoln Project swag. So stay tuned, and we'll play it after the break.
If you're telling somebody from the Florida Panhandle who gets in a pickup truck every morning and goes and works construction, if you're telling them that their privilege is an overbearing burden and they need to shut up, you are begging the Republican Party to pick them up, even if they're Democrats on paper. Well, they're burning the house down.
Please protect yourself.
Vice President, I'm speaking.
This is an embarrassment. If you count the legal votes, I easily win.
What the fuck? Have some faith, I'll make you a believer.
All right, welcome back to the breakdown. Okay, let's have some fun. It's the final block of the night. We're going to play a new game. This time it's called Guess Who. All right, just so you all know, I have no idea. This isn't rigged. I'm playing along just like you. We're all in this together. So since Rick is out, I'm going to go head to head with the audience, and this is how it's going to work. We've got a blurred image of a mystery person, and we're going to offer some clues to help us decide who this person is. Are they friend or foe? I don't know. I have no idea. But as we reveal the clues one by one, slightly reducing the blur after each clue, you guys can tweet at me at a hashtag Ask the Breakdown, or tweet at us. And whoever gets the answer right will nab some Lincoln Project swag. So let's get started. Okay, there it is. I was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know who that is. There's a couple people. At least we know it's not Barack Obama. He's not dark enough. I've appeared before a Senate Intel Committee. That does not narrow it down. I was questioned by Mueller's special counsel in 2017. I think the Nobel Peace Prize thing is throwing us off. I don't know who this is. I met my spouse at a business lunch. I don't know. I signed a book deal. That's half of Washington. This is not helping me any. Is this thing actually getting unblurred? Because it looks the same. Number 6, I have 3 children. I'm sucking at this. I went to Harvard. A lot of people went to Harvard. I was a fellow at Harvard. This is not helping. I don't know who this is. I was born in New Jersey. Now I feel like I should know because I'm so Jersey. I know everyone that's famous from Jersey. I was part of the Trump administration. From Jersey, Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know. I rarely speak in public. I have no idea who this is. But I'm hearing that we do have someone from the audience. So it looks like I'm going to lose again. I lost to Rick. Now I'm going to lose to the audience. I don't know. I have no idea who this person is. Do we get the reveal? Jared Kushner. Oh, for God's sakes. I should have known that. I'm embarrassed. There he is. Freaking Jared Kushner. I'm embarrassed that he's from New Jersey, actually. Now, at least his father went to prison in New Jersey. Oh, God, Jared. Guess what, Jared? You and Ivanka are still never getting a Met Gala invite ever again. That's for you, Rick Wilson. All right. Well, I'm glad that somebody won. Can we put the person who won again? I didn't announce them. I missed their name. Pseudo Tax Pro. You're going to win a Lincoln Project t-shirt. So thank you for playing. I appreciate you. I'm really embarrassed that I didn't get Jared Kushner. I should have known better. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. I didn't know that. I guess anyone can be nominated. Doesn't really matter, right? Anyway, thank you to our wonderful audience for playing along. We have to play that again, and hopefully I'll get better at it because that was terrible for me. But thank you guys for playing along. We appreciate you. And our producer will DM the winner, and he'll get you your Lincoln Project gear. All right, one last bit of housekeeping before we go. Little look ahead to the 4th of July, which is a big deal in my family. And we've been talking about our dogs and cats and our pets, and Julie Johnson was talking about her cute dog, Skeeter. Hopefully, Julie, if you're still watching, you can participate. It's not just dogs and cats that we love, any of your pets. We want to see pictures of your patriotic pets. We know that they don't like fireworks that much, and so we don't like that part for them, but we do want to see your furry friends in their patriotic gear. So we want you guys to tweet us your pets in their most patriotic outfits. And they just might be featured on the show. And we might pick a favorite. I don't know. We have to see because we're in a giving mood. We've been giving stuff away. But we still want to see your pets. So please send your pet photos in, your patriotic pet photos, and make sure you use hashtag #AskTheBreakdown. And we will reveal them on our January 6th show. So I'm excited about that. I don't know if I have any tiki patriotic photos, but I might have to change that between now and 4th of July so I can share those. But my mom's dog, Samantha, definitely has cool patriotic pet photos. So if I don't have tiki, at least I'll showcase Samantha. So I'm excited about that. I know there's going to be some cute ones. All right, you guys. Well, it's been a great show. We do miss Rick. He'll be back next week. And be sure to listen to the podcast. He's on there. And the Lincoln Project podcast is everywhere you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Google Play, on demand anytime. And if you want to hang out with me a little bit more, I'm hosting Lunch with Lincoln over on our Facebook and YouTube channel. Lunch with Lincoln, it's our new streaming series where we do a little lunchtime get together, a little chat, and I will be hosting it tomorrow, and I'll be featuring Michelle Kinney, who is one of our fantastic Lincoln Project staffers. She's in our creative department, and she also works for me and Rick. Michelle is awesome, and she has her hands in a lot of the creative of what goes on. So we're going to talk about how Lincoln Project ads get made and all that good stuff. So come hang out with us tomorrow at noon over at Lunch with Lincoln tomorrow. All right, don't miss it. And one last thing, free Britney. I'm a big Britney Spears fan. I feel horrible for her. And I'm with the Free Britney crowd. Free Britney. All right, guys. Have a good weekend. See you next week.